Welcome to the Living in Alignment podcast. My name is Amy Landry. Through a collage of conversations, here we distill mindful living and timeless wisdom within a modern, everyday context. Thank you for being here. Worthy of a great and honourable introduction, Colleena Shakti is one of my beloved teachers of this lifetime and is an artist of great subtlety and depth. Trained in Odissi classical Indian dance and well-versed in many styles of dance from India and beyond, Colleena lives a rare and artistic path steeped in rich tradition. Yoga, aesthetics, and related philosophies are an integral part of her holistic vision. Colleena has dedicated her life to dance ever since moving to India in 2001 to undergo intensive training in Odissi, as well as to research and document Rajasthani folk dances, music, and jewellery traditions. Colleena lived closely with a tribe of Kalbelia people and has witnessed many stages of evolution within their nomadic culture. She has had immense fortune to study under some of India's greatest masters for more than a decade and continues to dig deeper into the philosophies and practices which tie Indian dance to the path of yoga. Colleena is committed to honouring lineage and preserving traditional and quickly disappearing art forms of India. She lives most of the year in Rajasthan, India, where she founded Shakti School of Dance over a decade ago in the historical Rangnath Temple complex in the holy town of Pushkar. While in the summer months, she tours, performing and teaching worldwide, alongside hosting programs at her picturesque summer school on the Greek island of Crete. I cannot help but feel this introduction does not do you enough justice, Colleena. But from the depths of my heart, thank you for being here. It's a privilege to have some of your time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this.
My pleasure. There are so many elements to your path, to your practice and your work that I could easily and perhaps very greedily talk to you and listen to you for hours and days. But to begin, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about your background and your story? So how did you arrive here on such a unique and significant path?
Uh, okay, I'll try to recap. So, yeah, long story short, let's try not to get too hung up on the details. But I was born in California, in Southern California, and I think it's safe to say that in my years of growing up in America, I never really related to the way of thinking or kind of what was projected as my future as an American girl growing up. So I was very rebellious when I was a teenager, very rebellious. And I think that had a lot of impact on propelling me on a unique path in life. That rebelliousness and kind of nonconformity attitude. I was just looking for something a little bit more than the life I was presented in my upbringing. So I always say when I talk about my life story or the path that how I ended up here is punk rock music led me to yoga. So there, those rebellious years and all those punk rock lyrics, screaming and shouting for liberation, kind of initiated me on this path of just even putting that idea of liberation in my head, that there was some freedom to fight for. And I really do think that's what led me to yoga and to an unconventional path, was just looking for a way to experience life at a deeper level than how it was presented to me in my Southern California upbringing. So I was in college studying dance and anthropology when I first discovered Indian dance. And that was the pivotal moment. There was like this moment in class, we were studying the dances of Asia, and we arrived to dances of India, and we then arrived to Odissi dance. And it was literally just the first moment I saw a picture of an Odissi dancer. It was Madhavi Mudgal. We saw a picture and the description of the dance and studied a bit about the history. And I just remember in that very class thinking, this is so incredible. I don't want to read about it. I want to do it. It's not something outside of me. It's something I feel within me. And I really can't explain why that is, because I never had any association with Indian culture before that moment. But it kind of planted a seed in my head that that just really took off and grew. And a few years later, I had left college, saved up money, sold everything I owned, and then went to India when I was 20 years old to study Odissi. And so I thought I would be studying for about a year and master the dance and then come back to America. I mean, that's just what you imagine. Life is not, you know, you don't imagine where life will take you, especially when you're young. You just can't see how the pieces all fit together. But anyway, that year passed, and I was training in Orissa in a very traditional situation. My teacher didn't really speak a lot of English, and I was in a classroom with young boys. It was all young boys at my school. So I was the giant white girl that didn't speak a word of Odia, and everyone was terrified of me and just terrified to stand next to me in the classroom. But my teacher was very sweet, and you know, he acted really like a father figure. And so I persisted. So it was during that first year that I took a trip from Eastern India, from Orissa to Rajasthan, because I was also interested to find the folk dance of Rajasthan. I had seen a beautiful film called Lacho Drum when I was studying dancing in college. And in the beginning, actually it's the opening scene of the film, there's a Kalbelia dancer dancing under a tree in the desert. It's the most beautiful scene, I think, of any movie. And so I was also in search of this dance of the Kalbelia people of Rajasthan. So when I visited Rajasthan, I met some Kalbelia people and became friends with them, and they taught me their dance. And, you know, one thing led to the next, and here I am 20 years later, still with a lot of the same people in my life, still spending time with Kalbelia, still, you know, working with Rajasthani folk artists, dancers and musicians, still training in Odissi dance. And then I've opened my school. 15 years ago, I opened a dance school of my own. And so it was through the dance, the study of particularly Odissi, which is steeped in religious tradition and, you know, these Vedic traditions. Odissi, the context is very closely related to the worship that happens in the Jagannath temple, a Vaishnav temple in Puri, Orissa. So it's very much intertwined with religious traditions and religious practices, and then of course the spiritual philosophy that is associated. And so it's through the study of Odissi and just trying to understand the stories which we portray and the concepts which we're portraying through our gestures that I discovered yoga and meditation. So after starting with Odissi, I didn't come to India to find a guru or to find my spiritual self or anything like that. It kind of was the side effect of getting involved in the arts. And then obviously that what seemed like a side effect has now become the central point of the entire practice of my entire life, my whole body of work. Um, so after training in the dance and living in India several years, gosh, I think it was maybe 6 years into living in India, I met my spiritual guru. And that's a story of its own. But it was really after meeting him and taking initiation with him and being literally like held by the hand and guided into very deep philosophies and very deep spiritual practices, that I began to understand the nuances in this art form of Odissi. I began to understand how yoga is as much a part of a dance form like Odissi as the mudras are. Um, and so yoga entered into my practice and into my life, and just the whole, I would say the whole holistic picture opened up for me after meeting my guru, because he was able to reveal that interconnectedness of yoga, um, spiritual philosophy, India's ancient history and Sanskrit texts, how Ayurveda integrates into literally the way we practice dance, and how a dancer stays healthy, and how a dancer views her own body and mind. And so through all of that, I think of it like a web or a tapestry, all of that interconnectedness opening up to me. I also started to practice Kalaripayattu, and that was by my spiritual guru, Swami Vidyadishananda. Through his suggestion, I pursued training in Kalaripayattu, which is a part of that web that integrates emotional expression through abhinaya in dance, the Vira Rasa or the Rudra Bhava, the furious and the heroic aspect of martial arts, and the integration of Ayurvedic lifestyle and the yogic practices, which helps us to realize higher truths. And so all the little pieces were really woven together after meeting him. And so I've just been diligent on this path. And I think that's maybe one unique thing about my life is I feel the pull as someone from California, as a Westerner, from a modern, culture, modern reality. I didn't grow up in a village in Orissa. So coming from a very modern reality, whatever that means, I realized that the tendency of my culture and my upbringing was to diversify and to diffuse. And like as a dancer, I don't know, if I went to a dance university in the West, the administration encourages dancers to diversify and have a wide range of skill sets, and to perform many different styles. And so I feel like the Western model, or the modern model of life, is very much about going shallowly into many subjects. And so the thing that I just feel what's unique in my work right now is just to adhere to this path of a traditional art, which feels very much against the grain. Even in India today, many young and modern Indians ask me, why do you do Odissi? It's like something my mother did. It's so traditional. And so I just find myself sometimes a fish swimming upstream, in that sense of just, I'm not from that village in Orissa, but I feel a great responsibility and a great love for this tradition to carry it on and perpetuate it in an honorable way.
And I think that's what's beautiful about the experience of studying at Shakti School of Dance, is that you've created this really treasured experience where we directly integrate all of these paths, if you will, or practices, if you will, that are very almost segregated in the West. And perhaps that's why so many women come from all over the world, because whether consciously or subconsciously, we're craving more depth and more richness to our path that perhaps we're unable to access, or it's not so easy to access in the West.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that interconnectedness and the holistic vision, which is the tradition in the Vedic worldview, if you will, in Sanskrit literature and the wisdom that comes from these texts, it's a very holistic vision in a much deeper sense than how we use the word holistic, maybe like in a medical context or in some other context.
I have to say, just backtracking a little bit, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but
Yeah.
when you were telling your story, I, although I was aware of classical Indian music, and I had traveled to India, I'd never heard of Odissi. And it was recommended to me by a yoga teacher. And it wasn't only recommended to me, it was recommended to me that I have a look at you and your work. And I remember I was in Bali at the time, and I remember going to your website, and I just looked at you and looked at what you were doing. And I was like, I have to do that. And the next day was the day that the applications opened for the next season. And I remember I
Yeah.
applied, and I didn't tell anyone, because I thought I don't think I'm going to be able to go. I don't think I'll get in. And I remember I burst into tears when I got that application letter. And I don't know if you remember, it was obviously a number of years ago, but you were in Orissa at the time, and there was like typhoons or something, and the internet was out, and so there was a delay, as
Yeah.
tends to be the case. And I was thinking, oh no, I must have missed the boat. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, it came through. And I'm sure that so many women that have come to school and to study with you have had such a profoundly transformative experience. It's very, I think, difficult to articulate, but you've created such a special space and experience that I think is just tremendously reflective of your deep dedication and loyalty to, I guess, a really extensive path of studentship, which, yeah, I adore. And I would love to ask you on that note, as you share your story, can you reflect back and think of, I know that you are an avid reader, but can you think about whether there was a book, that really helped put you on this path, or, throw you onto this trajectory in any way?
Yeah, let's see. I guess, I mean, in the beginning, there wasn't necessarily a book, but there's one book that comes to my mind. And I had already been on my path for about 10 years. And I really had this feeling like, oh my God, I'm the only one on the planet that's ever gone through this. It's so unusual and so uncomfortable. As I explained, my early years of training in Orissa, just so awkward, and to be quite honest, like just really painful, if not at times traumatic. And just going through the process of being an awkward outsider to really integrating and finding truth in this art form and calling it my own now, finding my own way within it. That whole process was so uncomfortable. And it's really, I always think of it like, we have these cultural constructs built up in our head, the way we think, the way we view things, the way our value system. And going through a process like learning Odissi in a very traditional context, I had to day after day just peel back layers of cultural conditioning, or some whatever conditioning was there, just to look at life and look at art and look at my body in a different way. And so there was a book, there is a book, it's called When the Body Becomes All Eyes, by Philip Zarilli. And when I found this book, I mean, every page I read, I was just crying because I felt like finally someone else has articulated what I've been going through. I mean, he's an incredible scholar, and this book is about Kalari Payattu. So it's also how I just dove into the Kalari world. He's describing Kalari Payattu and his process of training and deconditioning his thought processes and his body mind. And so I just feel like that's one of the most valuable books I've ever read in my life, because every word that he wrote about his experience of training in this culturally nuanced martial art form of Kerala, it's like I had been through every one of those situations. And he's an incredible scholar and just articulates things in such a beautiful way. And then I would say another book that kind of threw me deeper into the world of studying Indian aesthetics, that I literally travel the world with this book in my bag. It's called The Dance of Shiva by Ananda Kumaraswamy. And anybody that studied with me knows that's the first book that I recommend, because he just breaks down in very inspiring and digestible papers. He has different chapters about Indian aesthetics and kind of contemplations on the Indian vision of what is beauty and what is art. So those are two of my most important books.
And what are you reading now? Which is there's probably a few things going on at all times, but maybe something that's significant.
I literally have a stack of books in front of me. So I'll read a few of the stack. At the top of the stack actually is The Argumentative Indian. Amartya Sen is the author, and it's a very important book on, it's also a series of essays, and he's an incredible scholar, and it's an important book about many issues surrounding, the very idea of what is India. But let's see, what is the chapter I was reading? The chapter is...
So you're going to give us some direct
Yeah,
juice from the book.
I'll give you page numbers if you need. The chapter is called The Indian Identity. And the first section of that chapter is colonialism and identity. And then it goes on from there. It's amazing. So I had seen this book around for a long time, but I finally got into it. And then it threw me on a whirlwind, because the next book under that one is Orientalism by Edward Said, which is a classic text. Anybody in a field like mine knows about this important book. Orientalism, anyway, we won't get into that. But that companionship with the argumentative Indian, I'm having a great time having arguments in my head at this point, and writing some articles and some theory classes from that. And then I have Dance Anatomy and Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom by Acharya Shunya, which is a very sweet, a very feminine book I just love to have around, and I've been picking that up, especially in the last few weeks. She just has a really motherly way of presenting Ayurveda. And I'll just read the last one. The Square and the Circle of Indian Arts. It's by Kapila Vatsyayan, who is a great scholar of Indian aesthetics, and it's like an amazing book.
So we get to absorb all the goodness that you're going to regurgitate back to us as we come and study with you, which is so good. I'd like to just direct the conversation a little bit to tradition. And there's sort of two questions around this. Firstly, and I know this is probably a question that is very difficult to simplify in an answer, but how do you personally honor tradition? And then second question is, how can we collectively and individually honor tradition? Because you come from that background, that Western culture, but you've had a deep experience of Indian culture and the tradition that comes along with that. And it can be very difficult to perhaps translate that into the Western world. And there's always that adjustment from coming out of India, I find that's very challenging, I think, when you leave. So I would love to know for you how you maintain that consistent sense of honoring tradition, what that looks like, and then how you feel that we can do the same.
Yeah, well, it's I feel like it's very central to my work. I mean, it's the absolute bindu, or the center point of everything, of all my work. And I think the common misconception from a more modern perspective is that tradition means lack of freedom, or losing the self-identity. And my personal story has been this incredible self-discovery within a very traditional construct. So where's the room for self-expression in a very codified classical dance form? And there is an incredible universe laid out in front of you when you know, just because there's codified footwork and hand gestures and eye movements doesn't mean you don't express yourself through that. It's like learning a language, and you just use these words which have already been created. You use it to tell your own story. So how do I honor tradition? I think it starts, I mean, it starts on the inside. You have to have faith in your tradition. The guru is central to every traditional art form in India, whether it's yoga, meditation, martial arts, painting, music, dance. The guru is absolutely central to that art form, because without somebody living and breathing and standing in front of you as a live example, then it's only theory that we're discussing. You know, like theoretically we could do this movement, or theoretically we could embody this value of art. But when you have a guru in front of you, when you have a teacher that embodies that, it's just becomes so much more tangible. So I think to honor tradition, you have to trust. It's called Shraddha. Guru Shraddha is to have faith in the guru. And this is a process. It's like falling in love. You meet someone and you get to know them, and slowly you develop more and more trust. You develop more trust for that love to unfold. And this relationship has been very central to all of the art forms that I study. So quite literally, how I honor tradition on a daily basis is I think of my gurus every time I do my dance. So when I first step I take onto the dance floor, I visualize my guru. I hear her voice, I see her body demonstrating the movement, I feel her presence and the atmosphere that comes with her. Every time I sit down to meditate, you know, I see a picture of my guru, I light a candle, I visualize, I pray, I surrender. So it's like that mental surrender that I go through anytime I begin my practice. And that presence, it's a very expansive feeling, because then it's not just me fighting alone with these dance movements or with this meditation technique. It's like I've sort of opened myself up to a much higher potential, something that I'm reaching for, which I haven't yet attained, and it just seems forever the carrot dangling in front of me that I'm just reaching for that greatness that my gurus embody. But if I didn't have that dangling in front of me, then I don't know. I think the experience might be a bit of stagnation or just losing inspiration. So I always tell my students, whenever you practice, you should practice like your teacher is sitting in front of you. You have to visualize, you have to just place your teacher on a chair right in front of you, and and then see their face and feel that, because that's our tradition, and somehow I see the benefit of, I feel the benefit of that I'm never alone in this never-ending battle towards perfecting myself as an artist and a yogi.
And so that makes me, it seems like a good segue to mention the concept of sadhana. And you recently released a really beautiful blog post around this that makes it a very accessible concept, but also provides a little bit of clarity around it. So would you mind just taking the time here to explain, like, what is sadhana and why is it so important, and, you know, perhaps how that looks for you, to get a bit of an idea?
Mm-hmm. So as I just recently wrote in a blog post, sadhana, sadhana kind of is often described as a practice. I feel like just at its shallowest level, we can say it's a practice. And so in this article, what I was trying to express was that there's layers to that, and those layers are literally layers of understanding of what we can achieve through a practice, but also it's the evolution or the natural progress of anybody who does a sadhana. So in my case of dance, in the beginning of learning dance, I was told, okay, here, learn these steps and now go practice. So there's practice, which is like, okay, I'll go practice this 10 times. You know, you have a piano teacher or a dance teacher, they're going to tell you to practice. So, okay, I'll go practice of the steps. This is practice, and it's what anybody can do. And then there's something that is called riyaz. It's an Urdu word, and you hear great Hindustani musicians talk about their riyaz. So riyaz is like this incredible effort put into practice, and riyaz is, it's kind of this abstract space that we've all experienced. It's when you practice something with such concentration that you lose yourself in it. So you lose maybe the sensation of time and space. You're just in it. It's like a higher level of concentration. And it's something that if you've experienced, whether it's writing or playing music or dancing, it's actually why we keep going back to dance classes and why we keep practicing. It's such a joyful experience. It's where all the nectar in a practice is. But riyaz kind of just stops at that level, in that, somebody can do incredible practice, but as a performing artist, I would say you most often come across people doing incredible practice to become great performers and to be famous and, for fame. So then you have another layer of practice, which is sadhana. And sadhana is a Sanskrit word that implies a particular goal in mind in a practice. And the goal is defined in all of the Vedic Sanskrit texts known by different names through different schools of philosophy, but we'll call it moksha, or liberation, as the main goal of this human birth. And so sadhana implies a practice that you do which brings you closer to that end goal, to that goal of spiritual transcendence or liberation. So as all the great yogis and sages before us know, to achieve such a lofty thing as spiritual transcendence or eternal liberation, realizing of truth, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of discipline. And in fact, there's like almost this edge of pain associated with it. So that's why you hear, you know, the word tapas, the heating practices, incredible self-sacrificing practices, which eventually bring us bliss, but maybe in the beginning, you know, to sit in an asana and to meditate even for half an hour. Anyone who's tried to do that knows in the beginning you face pain and frustration, and until you start to develop this kind of dispassionate attitude or transcendental attitude towards your pain and the sacrifice that goes into that, then you know, you don't move on to the higher levels. So sadhana aims at a kind of complete transformation or transcendence. And the beautiful thing about Indian classical arts is that the artistic tradition is linked with the spiritual tradition. And that's elaborated on in our Sanskrit texts relating to dance and to the arts. So art, in my case, dance, is kind of promised to us as practitioners as a path towards liberation. And so much that in our Odissi tradition, the final choreography that we always perform is called moksha. So out of 5 dances in our repertoire, the final dance we perform is moksha, representing the goal of our sadhana, of our years and years of practicing this dance and performing this dance. So sadhana is, I would say, like, it's the kind of attitude that you have in practice. It is an outlook or a belief that you have that what you are doing is a purifying practice. And the beautiful thing about Indian tradition, as I said, is that the arts are considered purifying practices, just like yoga asana. Dance also brings us to transcended states of mind, and ultimately a transcendence of the body, even though we're performing insanely complicated movements with the body in time with the music. What we experience through years and years of practicing a choreography is literally transcending the body and losing, I mean, in my own case, I feel like sometimes I'm on stage and I'm witnessing my body moving, but I'm simply a witness. And that is, you know, what we also aim for in a seated meditation. So because the arts and the spiritual traditions are entwined, we have that tradition of calling our dance practice sadhana. So I just think, you know, I have many students who come to study Odissi, not because they want to become professional performers of an Indian classical dance form, but because that possibility is so incredible that we can use art as a means of transcending the mundane. It's such an incredible proposition that I think just being in that field of practice, many of my students, they come to class every day and they're pushing their limit. Their limit is different than my limit or different than another person's limit that's in the classroom. But the point is to push their limits and to transcend overcome those hardships of practice with a higher goal in mind. And so to me, that is sadhana.
So it's essentially, in a very simplistic way, what I'm sensing here is that it's very much about intention in a way. Like, what is the intention behind
Mm-hmm.
the practice? Would that be correct?
Yeah, thanks for summing that up.
Well, you said attitude, and that makes sense. But what was coming through is like intention, and and being very pure and conscious in that, uh, clear in that intention, I think.
Yeah.
So, on the note of sadhana, I recognize and acknowledge that you are someone who embodies studentship constantly and diligently and never-endingly. But what does studentship and being a student look like for you right now? Like, what are you really digging into and, immersing in?
Let's see. Well, I make it a point to spend a lot of time with my gurus every year. So I do have several gurus. I have my spiritual guru, and then I have my Odissi guru. I have my teacher of Kalari Payattu. So I try to divide my year. Things have changed in my life in the last few years, since getting married and a few different changes, but I generally always had this belief that I want to spend half the year being a student and half the year I can be a teacher. But I guess that's how it's telling of how I view myself. There is there's a need to share what you've been working on. I mean, there's a need. Every time I teach, I learn so much about what I'm teaching. I examine it from different perspectives, and someone's difficulty, a student's difficulty, propels me deeper into the subject, because I try to think, how can I explain this in a way that they will relate to? And so it forces me to grasp my art from different perspectives. So that's a very important part, but I just never want to be one of these people that knows everything, because that would be so boring. I would just end there. I just want to know more and more and more. And the more years I am classical Indian dance, fascinating it gets close to my teachers, for a good part of the year. And I say live near them because with my spiritual guru, it's like we do silent retreats where we are living with him in silence and receiving teachings. And I go and I live in Orissa. And why I keep stressing the word live is because the very concept of guru in our tradition is that someone embodies the ethos of an art form. In this case, we'll come back to dance. So to live near my Odissi guru, I take dance class with her, but I also help stage when she's performing. And I also answer emails for her, and I massage her feet, and I do all these, seemingly mundane tasks. But in all of those interactions, I learn what it is. An incredible dancer. I mean, how does a dancer of her caliber take care of her feet? It's like, what does a dancer of her caliber respond to in an interview, and what are the things that she is sharing with the world about the art form of Odissi? And so it's not just the dance classes and learning new choreographies and learning new steps. It's just going deeper into the life of the art. So that's an important part of studentship for me. I don't think that's the path for everyone. It takes an incredible amount of patience to learn in that way. And that's what I know is unique in my path, is that many many foreigners who come to study dance, they come, they're in and they're out, they take the move and then they go home. And for me, I don't know if it's that I'm a slower learner or I just I want to feel it in a different way, but I just feel like I need to live in the culture of that art. In my Kalaripayattu studies, just being in Kerala and being immersed in a world where Ayurveda is kind of it's just thriving in the air. It helps me understand my body in the context of this martial art form. And I could take a Kalaripayattu class somewhere else in the world, but I know just being in that environment, it's somehow enters into my body in a different way, in a deeper way. So that's an important part of my journey as a student, and and it unfolds slowly, but
it's very much almost like a sensory experience, if you will. I think that I certainly, when I'm around you, even just having this conversation with you, I know that it's going to impact me in a way that when I get off this call and the way I show up tomorrow, and just being in your presence and the presence of our teachers is profoundly influential. And there's that energetic exchange, but also, as you say, is being in India, the sensory experience of the sounds and the smells and just the whole experience in general helps us. Well, it's helped me very much anchor into a deeper experience of whatever it is that I'm there for or studying, and that can obviously be very challenging. Like, as you say, if you come and you learn something and then you just go home, it's like, it's very challenging to then continue to embody and live that in a really sincere way, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of the senses, I just wanted to ask you a couple of little random questions though. What would you say is your favorite sound?
My favorite sounds, okay. First thing that comes to mind is the voice of my Gurudev. Just hearing his soothing speech. Next thing that comes to mind is the slap of my feet dancing. Yeah, I think those are the sweetest sounds.
When we did the Vinyasa Krama practice with you the other day on Instagram Live, it was so, like, I had tears coming down my face in just standing in Tadasana, because it was like hearing your voice, but also the sounds of India in the background. And there's just something so like it just transported me for a moment, and it was just so sweet and blissful. And what would be your absolute favorite go-to meal on the planet?
Oh, masala dosa, of course.
South Indian's the best. And what would you say is your daily non-negotiable? If you had to pick one.
Sadhana. I have a lot of non-negotiables, actually. Very busy woman. I have a regimen of different sadhanas, and they're non-negotiable. Yeah.
I'm not at all surprised at the response to that. And would you like to share what you have coming up in the future with those that are listening, and really maybe give a little bit of a background, a context to studying with you and coming to school, whether that's in India or in Greece?
Yeah, well, we have Greece coming up, I hope. So we do a summer school every year on the beautiful island of Crete in Greece. And we have a beautiful villa there that we've had for 2 years now. And we started this summer program. It's just the perfect balance for spending most of the year in India, to go somewhere in the solitude of nature and to be able to swim in the Mediterranean and the olive oil and the fruit off the trees. It's a very fertile, very beautiful place. And so we do a summer program there. which is a residential program. So it's our Shakti summer school. And the idea is just what I was saying, how my studentship has been very much focused on living with my gurus. And the Sanskrit word for that is gurukul, is to live at the house of the guru. And while I humbly don't call myself a guru, that idea of being a student and living together in a place where you can live the ideals and the values of the art that you're studying, I think is very important. And that's why I chose an isolated, beautiful, rejuvenative, inspiring place in Europe to invite people to come and spend part of their summer to study. So we are planning 4 weeks of Odissi training, and the days start with yoga, and we dance Odissi classical Indian dance, and then the days end with theory class, discussing everything from yoga and Vedanta to Indian aesthetic theory, or learning the mudras, or hearing stories of Krishna. So sometimes we do those classes in nature under the olive trees, as the great philosophers of ancient Greece used to do, sit under the olive trees and discuss theories of beauty. So we do 4 weeks of Odissi, and then this year I'm launching a new program, which is Indian fusion formation. And so I also practice an Indian fusion style of dance, which is it's a compilation of all the dances that I have embodied in my lifetime. I started as a belly dancer and interested in Middle Eastern folkloric dance, and then obviously got into Indian dance. So it's a playful yet thoughtful space where I fuse a lot of different movement vocabularies together, and maybe is my most modern style of dance that I practice, although fusing in all kinds of concepts from ancient Indian dance. And then this year we also have a guest teacher coming to teach a tribal belly dance retreat. And we are all set to start our summer school at the end of June, and we are just praying that everything's going to be okay and people are able to travel then. We have a lot of people registered already, and we're just praying for the best, for that all to unfold smoothly, although all of us are waiting to know what life is going to be like in a few weeks. But that's what we have planned right now. And then every winter here in Pushkar, Rajasthan, I conduct my trainings at Shakti School of Dance here in the Rangnath Temple, and we're looking forward to that. It starts in next January, so we have a little while to wait for that.
But essentially, you're offering both summer school and Shakti School of Dance every year. So no matter when the listener is listening to this, it's an annual thing, which is wonderful. And you, of course, are doing workshops most years in the United States as well as Bali.
Yes, yeah. I always take a visit back to the US, and we do a retreat every year in Italy, in the Gitananda Ashram. We do a yoga and Odissi dance retreat there every year around September. And yeah, we have, I mean, I think all of us are a little uncertain of our future this year. So certainly, like many other colleagues of mine, I will be trying to explore more online options of study. Although I'm just a dedicated believer and living proof of how important it is to be close to our teachers and live with them and spend time with them. But if we can't do that, then next best thing is, I guess, online. So I'm trying to work with slow internet speeds here in India to make some online classes happen.
I testify to that because, like I said before, just, not only speaking with you now, but the couple of things that you've done lately online has just been very enriching and heart-filling, because I feel, I've not been able to travel back to India as much as I used to and as I would like to. The life of motherhood, really, but it's still invaluable to have that connection nonetheless, either way. So thank you. And before I let you go, would you like just to share where we can send people that are listening, where they can find you and find your work online, etc.?
Yeah, well, I have a website, KolleenaShakti.com, and we try to keep that pretty up to date. Otherwise, I'm on Facebook, Colleena Shakti. I'm on Instagram, Colleena Shakti, and you can also look to learn more about our school here in Pushkar. There's Shakti School of Dance Instagram account that has some really beautiful videos we just put up. And as I said, I'm trying to get more modern in my outreach, and I tried to do an Instagram live, although I recorded on the wrong account this week. So next week, I hope to hit the right buttons and do yoga practice with everyone on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock India time on my Instagram account, Colleena Shakti.
And hopefully it'll become a bit more of a regular thing. We pray.
Yeah, because why not? I mean, we're all enjoying Connect, so why does it have to stop? The quarantine stops.
And just for clarity's sake, for those listening, when you say your website and your Facebook and your Instagram, Colleena is with a double L and a double E. So just as I'm sure there's not many Colleena Shaktis on the planet though, so you'll probably be.
But there's a lot of possible spellings. People spell my name all kinds of ways.
Yes, yeah. So just for clarity, that's a double L and a double E. But I'm sure Google will bring up the goods anyway. But I'll leave it there, and thank you so much for your time. It's just such a great, as I said, privilege and an honor to speak with you, and I'm forever grateful that you've been able to do this, especially with the unreliable reputation of Indian internet and connection. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
If this episode was of value to you and your life, please subscribe. And if you can think of someone who would benefit from this dialogue, please do them a favor and send it their way. If you feel called, hop on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. This is the best way to get these conversations into the ears and hearts of our wider community, to those who need it most. You can find me at amyelandry.com or over on Instagram at amyelandry. May we all move a little closer to a life living in alignment.